Something simple today, and that is the question of how often do we actually explore our minds by thinking about entirely different and alternative things and using those to question the prevailing status quo. In other words, how do we inherently create conflict within ourselves? And one of the many predictions today is that conflict management, working with bipolarities, are of the most important attributes that future executives will look for when they appoint people. Because we are going to live with far greater contradictions, with more bipolarities, with seemingly mutually exclusive viewpoints that in fact may not at all be mutually exclusive as we think. And the only way to do that is really to expose ourselves to a very wide variety of viewpoints, thinking, attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, visual things like the arts, nature, amazing stories that we may or may not be aware of, the way in which certain species solve certain problems. Why can an airline not emulate some of the elements of an Uber? Why can many other industries not emulate of the better attributes of an Amazon? In other words, where we are restrictive and we can't really think creatively, let us use industries around us and use those to help us guide creativity and guide thinking. In other words, ask ourselves the questions, and you can do that using the business model canvas. One of the things I really love, because it basically dissects a business down into its component parts, and it forces you to ask certain questions that will construct a new business model in a different way. And utilize that by taking an Uber and thinking, how can Uber be utilized for Lufthansa, for an entirely different manufacturing kind of business? And is there learnings that we can take from that can ultimately help us think differently? Because there are no industries anymore that we know by now. Solutions to consumer problems and consumer challenges straddle great divides and straddle markets and industries that we know and we used to know historically. So we need to move beyond that. We need to forget about the fact that there were industries, and we need to think about how do we solve problems in different ways. How do we solve consumer and customer problems in new ways without being constrained by, call it, the chains of the past. Otherwise, we end up in the well-known scenario of myopia. And myopia is the death of innovation, the death of change. If you take the top 10 brands today, it is not for nothing that most of those are indeed new companies that did not exist 20 years ago. The reason why they are is because they took the same consumer issues and problems that we've known about all along, and they used different ways to solve those. It's not as though they all of a sudden discovered new problems and new issues. They just looked at those from a different angle and placed the consumer in the center. And they were not constrained about the business model and what it looks like surrounding it. In other words, let us look at that and at different ways and different questions, and use the tools that are out there, as well as the examples that are out there, to solve these problems and these challenges. In the very least, we will learn a lot more about the way our business works. Cheers, guys.